Hi there, I'm Grady Simmons with the International CCS Knowledge Center. We're an organization dedicated to sharing knowledge and information to help advance the development of carbon capture and storage projects worldwide. As part of our ongoing CCS Knowledge Spotlight series, we're talking to leaders of companies and organizations across the global CCS ecosystem about the opportunities and challenges of bringing CCS projects to life as the world strives to reach a net zero emissions future. Today, we're learning about Carbon Alpha, a full-service developer of CCS and carbon dioxide removal projects based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. They provide technical, operational, and regulatory expertise to help their clients plan and execute carbon capture, transportation, and storage projects. And they were recently chosen to support an innovative bioenergy with CCS project underway in partnership with an Indigenous community in northern Saskatchewan. We're fortunate to be joined by Carbon Alpha's co-founder and chief operating officer, Patrick Elliott, who will tell us more about Carbon Alpha's vision and some of the key projects they're working on. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today, Patrick.
Well, Grady, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it and appreciate all the hard work that the CCS Knowledge Institute and Center does for the industry.
Yeah, you bet. Well, why don't we start with some of the real high-level background about Carbon Alpha? Can you tell us more about how the company was formed and sort of what it focuses on and where it fits with the broader CCS industry at this point?
Sure. So we started Carbon Alpha in 2021. Myself and co-founder partner Simon Bergazzi, CEO, were just exiting from Jupiter Resources, which we co-founded back in 2014. And as we were looking out over the landscape, we saw an opportunity and a real need to bring our subsurface expertise and development expertise to the energy transition sphere, and specifically CCS developments. And we felt that that would be an interesting and exciting space to enter. And we started the company with a handful of really dedicated folks that came over from Jupiter Resources and subsequently have added since that time. But our company is truly composed of engineers, geologists, geophysicists, development engineers, reservoir engineers specifically, facility engineers, financial people, and IT professionals. And we built this business really focusing on working on projects in the carbon avoidance space or the compliance space in Alberta. And we've worked all across BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. We've done some work in Ontario and a little bit of work in Quebec as well. So we've started and have really kind of grown the business now to have about roughly around 18 full-time employees and then around 6 consultants who work with us on a pretty regular basis. So we have one of the larger dedicated teams of technical professionals in this space now in Canada.
So did you guys, it sounds like you guys started mainly seeing an opportunity to support and help companies start figuring out their plans for CCS, primarily with the subsurface and the CO2 storage that needs to obviously be figured out as part of the project plan. But it sounds like it's grown a bit from there, and you provide more of that kind of full scale support for the various aspects of CCS from sort of the planning and regulatory to capture and then eventually the storage. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think a good example is when we started in 2020, really we saw an opportunity to support large industrial emitters in specifically Alberta, who was at that time starting to allocate pore space for carbon storage to industry. And we saw a lot of large industrial emitters who had aspirations to decarbonize their industrial operations, but they just didn't have the subsurface knowledge. If you could imagine, if you're a petrochem company or if you're a power producer, you've never really worked in the subsurface, so you don't understand the subsurface. Yet it's really important when you capture CO2 to have a place to store it safely and permanently. And so that's the opportunity that we saw initially, and we really worked in that industry. We were public with a group called Heartland Generation. They were the second largest emergent power producer in Alberta. And they're a great example of the type of work we did. We worked with them very closely to help them conceptualize what the storage requirements would be, how much tenure that they needed to capture from the government during that process, so that when the government was allocating those pore spaces out, we did the full geological review of all the existing wellbores in throughout the area, understand the target formation, which was the basal Cambrian sandstone. We acquired all the seismic that was necessary, reprocessed the seismic, picked drilling locations, supported all the regulatory pathways and applications that the company needed to make. And we were really working as an advisory firm. So we didn't have a financial stake in the project. We were there to help support the development of the overall project from the storage and transportation side. They were handling the capture component, and most large industrial emitters, they're looking at 1 million to up to 5 million tons, or, if you look at pathways, significantly more amount of CO2 that those groups are handling. They're really looking at managing all the capture aspects within their plant boundaries themselves. So we really were focused on transportation and subsurface storage. That's changed a little bit when we were working into the CDR space.
Right, exactly. Tell me more about that. So what are you guys really focused on now? I know, as I mentioned at the beginning, you have an exciting new project that you're part of. That sounds like the scope is quite a bit larger with the North Star project in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. We're working with the Meadow Lake Tribal Council in northern Saskatchewan, based out of Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. They represent 9 different First Nations that came together in the 50s and 60s to build a business development arm. They have a wonderful portfolio of companies. And here we found the opportunity where they owned a sawmill. And about a year and a half ago, they commissioned a bioenergy facility that took all the waste wood from the sawmill and then combusted it to create powered heat for the sawmill, but also sold extra power to the grid in Saskatchewan.
Hmm.
That facility is up and going, and we saw the opportunity to add carbon capture to that. And what that would create is a BECCS project. And BECCS is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And this is a new and exciting part of carbon removal space. So the opportunity here, which is different than the compliance space, is that we're using the trees as a mechanism that has collected the CO2 from the atmosphere through photosynthesis, and then through harvesting those trees and creating lumber, and then taking all the waste wood and then combusting that waste wood for the generation of power. We capture that CO2 and then store that CO2 in the subsurface. And what essentially we've done there is we've directly taken CO2 out of the atmosphere through the trees, through that process, and then permanently stored it in the subsurface. So this is truly a carbon removal process, and it's very different than the carbon avoidance or compliance markets, where if you're a large industrial emitter, you're burning hydrocarbons, you're taking hydrocarbons from the subsurface and then burning them and releasing the CO2 in the atmosphere. And you undertake CCS to avoid that. Here in the carbon removal space, with this particular project, we're directly removing CO2 from the atmosphere.
Right, interesting. So obviously generating electricity, or zero emissions electricity, but also removing carbon from the carbon cycle because it's based on the biofuel, based on the renewable resource of the trees. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is this could be Canada's first BECCS project, and there's a number of BECCS projects being contemplated globally now, and it's a recognized pathway to help decarbonize historical emissions. It's one of the only ways, other than the direct air capture or biochar, to actually remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And this opportunity, in partnership with Meadow Lake Tribal Council, really leads the way not only for Indigenous groups to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and supporting those efforts, but also leadership in Canada. And there's a lot of other forestry opportunities I think that could exist within Canada, and a lot of different operators now looking at these types of opportunities. And so we're happy to speak about it and share this opportunity because we think it could play a great role for Canada and also a great role for the First Nations.
Yeah. Yeah, a real win-win, that's for sure. Tell us more about Carbon Alpha's role in this project in particular. What are you focused on as the developer or helping the tribal council develop the project?
You bet. Well, I think what we're really excited about is that in this particular project, unlike the compliance space where we act as an advisory firm, here we're actually going to have equity ownership in the project. So that is significant for us. It gets back to our roots as a developer and actually having a stake in the projects and having ownership in the projects. It's something that we've always aspired to. So we're really pleased to be in this type of position. But not only are we obviously evaluating the subsurface and ensuring that we have safe, permanent storage of CO2, we are also looking, of course, at developing the pipeline that's required to connect the source to the actual sequestration spot. We're very comfortable in that type of position. But we're also working on the facility side. And here, in this particular project, the North Star project, we will be leading all of the capture selection and integration into the existing facilities. So really, truly, we're working on the capture, the transportation, and the storage. And then, of course, as part of the project developer, we're also working with stakeholders, all of the work that we're doing with the community so that they're aware of these projects. We're working with the landholders as we think about developing drilling sites and transportation corridors and so forth. So all of that work that we will be doing. In addition to that, we'll be working in the carbon markets. We'll be getting these projects up and going, get them registered on carbon registries and participating in that aspect of the project as well. And then on top of that, there's all the regulatory aspects that we're going to be managing with the government of Saskatchewan. And I think one of the more exciting things that we've been able to achieve here in the last couple of months is that we were awarded the pore space so that we can store the CO2 in the subsurface from the government of Saskatchewan. So we have a lot going on, but it's something that we're very familiar with. I mean, a lot of the things that we just talked about are very familiar to people in the energy industry and the upstream energies specifically. So we're happy to bring that skill set and excited to bring that skill set to this project.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Sort of the full chain of the project from the engineering and planning at the beginning to regulatory and feed study and all that sort of thing, kind of acting as their developer and advisors. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about our relationship with Meadow Lake Tribal Council. They're a fantastic group, and all of the revenues that they would generate from this project will be in support of their communities and the community infrastructure and the support programs for all the various communities. So it's a wonderful partnership. I would encourage everybody to go and have a look at Meadow Lake Tribal Council. They have a great website that demonstrates their commitment to the community and the things that they do with the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. What do you see, I guess, a little more broadly in terms of the opportunities, primarily in Canada, since that's, certainly your focus at the moment for carbon dioxide removal and BECCS projects more generally? Obviously, the North Star one is, could be one of the first or the first in Canada. Do you see more opportunity there in various places to get these projects built, maybe in comparison to some of the really large CCS projects that we've often focused on, at cement plants and big power plants and those sorts of things?
Well, yeah, we're very excited about this opportunity because what we found is that we working in the compliance space, we were working on large projects, looking up to 5 million tons per year of total emissions abatement, which is significant. If we think about Shell Co-Op's project, that's 1 million tons per year, and that's a global leader. So some of the projects that were being nominated throughout Alberta here are significant. And those projects are complicated. When you get that big, you've got massive infrastructure that you need to design around and so forth. What we like about the BECCS projects is that they're smaller, so the capital required to build these things is not, hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. These are maybe $100 million to $200 million type of opportunities. And a lot of the capture equipment is scaled and modular for some of these smaller emission amounts. So, for instance, total emissions at North Star is 100,000 tons per year that we will be abating. Um, and there's a lot of equipment that is well suited for that. It's pre-designed for 100,000, so you can modularize that up to 500,000 tons per year. So that organizing and managing those types of projects are simpler. And we have a little saying where big projects will get all the headlines and the small projects get built. And those are the types of projects that we're after, and we're very excited about that. And I think that in regards to the opportunity set, the forestry industry is massive in Canada. It's a big industry. They are stewards of the forests. They by harvesting the trees and using that wood for forestry products, they are essentially locking up a lot of CO2 into those wood products. And just through the forest management, they spend a lot of time thinking about sustainability. But these types of projects, BEX projects, is a new avenue for them to really participate in carbon removals. And I think it's quite unique to the forestry industry, and they can actually play a pretty significant leadership role. And I think there's a growing awareness about this opportunity with them. And it's an exciting time for the forestry industry.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned this before, but obviously, all carbon capture projects at this point are very much collaborations and partnerships to get them done. In the past, with some of the big existing ones like the Boundary Dam project in Saskatchewan, Quest, a lot of government funding went into them to just get them built initially. And now I think we're entering a new phase where it's a little more of a true partnership between the industry, between government, between communities, indigenous communities, and others to, come to the table and figure out how they can all be involved and how they can all benefit from them and ultimately get them built. Do you think that's a fair assessment? And what do you see the role as sort of collaboration in getting?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that, what we're seeing now is, unlike when Shell Quest was built, it was really built as a great partnership between the government of Alberta, Canada, and Shell itself. And it was heavily subsidized without a doubt. And but one of the great things that came from that project is it created true leadership. And Shell spent a lot of time thinking their way through the process, developing that process, and developing all of the um, methodologies to properly go about these types of projects. And they, as part of the deal with the governments, they had to publish all of their annual reports, which has really become the blueprint, I think, for a lot of projects, not only in Alberta or Canada, but globally. I think a lot of people are looking at that project because it's really seen as a successful project. But now we're at the stage where the carbon markets have evolved, and now there is commercial drivers behind these projects. And with that, that's motivating groups like Carbon Alpha to form, to come together, bring private capital, bring expertise into this arena. And so, yeah, we are seeing collaboration. We speak all the time to the different carbon capture technology providers. We speak to our peers in this space. There's more work than any of us can handle. And as a result, we tend to share a lot of information. I'm pretty proud of the folks here in the technical team at Carbon Alpha. We've started something called Chasm, which is an industry forum that brings a lot of technical professionals together to talk specifically about CCS. And it's been up and going now for a year, and we have 70 people, always sold out every session. And we've had some wonderful keynote speakers like Don Lawton come in, who's had a lot of experience in Western Canada, to share his insights with people. And everyone's there to problem solve and to share challenges that we're all facing to work through this collaboratively. Our teams present at the SPE or SIGA. These are technical societies where we're providing papers, and there's other groups doing the exact same thing. And this is just leading to a greater amount of collaboration and support for everybody. And I think we think it's really important because ultimately we have to win regulatory and stakeholder approval for these types of projects. These CCS projects have existed since the 1980s. There's about 40 of them up and going. There's another, I think, 300 in the queue to be developed in the future. It's seen as a real way to help industry decarbonize. And so we need to ensure that we're successful with both regulators and the public.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a little bit too, related to collaboration, the concept, the idea of knowledge sharing. I think Canada has been a leader in that as well for the reasons you mentioned with projects like Quest, Boundary Dam, being quite committed and required to share technical information, but also the experience that we have now, like you said, around regulatory experience, stakeholder experience. Do you see that as maybe an advantage that Canada and Canadian projects have, and where do you see the importance of that in trying to get stuff built?
No question. When you look at Alberta's regulatory pathway for CCS development, it has to be a global leader. It has to be considered a global leader. The regulatory pathway and regulatory carbon capture and storage legislation was first passed in 2011, updated in 2016. Alberta is far and away ahead of any province in Canada. A lot of provinces look at Alberta's situation and are working towards that, and they have their own processes as well. But we have a lot of advantage even over the United States when it comes to regulatory perspectives. And I think a lot of it is from projects like ShellQuest or Boundary Dam and the work that the CCS Knowledge Center has been doing. There's no question that advocating for these types of projects and getting government support for them has truly worked. We in Western Canada come from a situation where we have oil and gas operations occurring all the time. And so the regulators are very comfortable with drilling wells, very comfortable with pipelines. The communities in rural Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC, Manitoba are very comfortable with operations in an oil and gas sense. And so these are just a nuance of that, but it's important to define those different regulatory pathways, and it's important to define that we're in a slightly different project. But all of the expert knowledge that we have in Western Canada, the fabrication for all of the equipment that we would need, the expertise to do this type of work from a technical professional standpoint, we have all that. We have all of the ingredients in Western Canada to be very successful at that.
Yeah, great. Maybe just lastly, are there any particular challenges, I guess, that stand out to you in terms of what you guys are seeing and with your company, but with the industry as a whole right now that need to be addressed, or what are some of the key challenges that still need to be sorted out to get projects moving and to ultimately get this large expansion of CCS really underway in Canada and around the world, because it's going to be such an important thing, um, you know, required to meet net zero targets.
Well, I think one of the big things we got to recognize is that we're pioneering a new industry. Everybody collectively, we're all pioneering a new industry, and there's no question. Whereas we have great regulatory processes, our fiscal policies in Canada have not evolved quickly enough to help support some of the large emitters from making decisions to undertake CCS. And so, we've heard in the press and we've seen projects get dropped, and it's mostly going to be around their perceptions about being able to access capital to drive these projects forward. The compliance market is one where in Canada, of course, we're subject to carbon tax, clarity on that carbon tax, understanding if it's going to be actually if the carbon tax is going to get legislated to $170 a ton or not is obviously really important. There's been a number of programs suggested to try to mend that situation so that people can have confidence. But it's all about getting confidence on determining what that carbon price will be. So ultimately, you can monetize that credit so that you can finance these projects. And without that clarity, some of these projects in the compliance space have slowed down and they're taking pause. And so that's obviously troublesome to the advancement of this industry, the CCS industry, and it's a challenge for us. And it's also a reason why we're focusing on our carbon removal industry in the voluntary carbon market, which is very different and distinct from the compliance market. But if there's one thing that I guess we would comment on is that we have seen a lot of the prospective customers that we would want to support really take pause, and it's all around that fiscal policy aspect.
Yeah, needing more certainty really for the economics and the business cases. Well, that covers it, I think. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to add as we wrap up here, Patrick?
No, I think that I really appreciate being able to come on and participate with you, Grace. So thank you very much. We appreciate the work that you do at the CCS Knowledge Institute. Center. We think that this industry is it's going to grow over time. We're hopeful of that. The more knowledge that we get out there about how these projects work and get more support from the regulators and also the general public, I think that's a great role that we all need to play, and it's important for everybody. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks very much. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and wish you good luck going forward with this project, the North Star project, and the others that you're working on.
Thank you.